Hey, sleepyheads. Welcome back to the channel. I'm here to help you fall asleep tonight. So before we get started, if you're enjoying this video so far, give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any future sleep content. And don't forget to tap the notification bell so you know when I upload new videos to help you drift off. Whether it's late at night for you or you're catching this during the day, I hope this video helps you relax. Now, get comfortable and cozy in your bed. Take a deep breath, let your eyes gently close, and get ready to drift off to sleep. Things had been rough lately. Money was tight, jobs were scarce, and I was starting to feel the pinch. For the past 2 years, I've been drifting from town to town, chasing after any work I could find, always one step ahead of the eviction notice. Desperate times called for desperate measures, and I found myself sinking lower than I ever thought possible, taking a door-to-door sales job. It was for some shady water filtration company. I wasn't even sure if the product was legit, but they paid commission, and I was getting pretty good at ignoring that nagging voice of conscience. After 3 days of having doors slammed in my face, I was ready to give up, but I needed the money badly. Just one more sale, I told myself, then I'd quit this miserable job. The sun was already sinking below the horizon as I approached the last house on Harlow Street. It was a ramshackle place, with peeling paint, overgrown weeds, and a broken front window patched with cardboard. Part of me wanted to just walk away, but the thought of another empty stomach spurred me on. I regretted at the moment I set foot on the creaking wooden steps. I knocked, the sound echoing in the silence. No answer. I was about to turn away when the door creaked open a crack. The hallway inside was shrouded in darkness, and I couldn't make out the face of the man standing there. His voice, though, was deep and gravelly. "What are you selling?" he asked. Startled, I fumbled with the brochures in my hand. "I'm with Clearstream Water Solutions," I stammered, my voice hoarse from a day of talking. "If you have a moment, I'd like to show you just how dirty your tap water really is." He didn't move, just stared at me, as if trying to decide if I was a threat. Finally, he opened the door wider, beckoning me inside. I hesitated. Did I really need the sale that badly? The gnawing hunger in my stomach answered for me. I stepped across the threshold, following the man into the darkness. The interior of the house was dim and smelled of damp earth. I expected it to be filthy, but it was strangely bare. We walked across creaking floorboards to the kitchen, which was almost empty. A table with 2 chairs took up most of the space. There was a knife block filled with gleaming blades, a microwave, and a fridge. No dishwasher, no plates, no mugs, not even a trash can. "May I have a glass of water to test?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly. The man turned towards the sink, and that's when it hit me. A wave of cold fear washed over me, and my stomach churned. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. The man was tall and powerfully built, his eyes glinting in the dim light. He looked well-fed, unlike me, with my gaunt frame and hollow cheeks. It hadn't always been this way. Years ago, I was in good shape, but months of sporadic meals and constant stress had taken their toll. Now, I was trapped alone in a strange house with a man who was clearly not what he seemed. Instead of getting a glass of water, The man lunged. I instinctively raised my clipboard as if it could shield me from his attack. It didn't. One solid punch to the face sent me crashing to the floor, my nose exploding in pain and blood. Panic seized me, my mind reeling. A year ago, I might have stood a chance, but now I was weak, out of shape, and completely at his mercy. He was on me in an instant, his weight pinning me down. I thrashed and kicked, but it was useless. He was too strong. With a grunt, he wrenched my arms behind my back, ignoring my cries of pain. He slammed my head against the floor, and the world went black for a moment. When I came to, my wrists were bound with a zip tie, cutting into my skin. He hauled me to my feet, and I knew I had to act fast. With a desperate heave, I threw myself backwards, slamming into the kitchen counter. The knife block clattered to the floor, scattering sharp blades across the tiles. I scrabbled for one, managing to grip the handle in my bound hands. A weapon, but useless in my current position. A sudden knock at the door froze us both. I almost cried out for help, but the sight of a gun barrel pointed at my face silenced me. He shoved me into a chair, my fingers still clutching the knife, thankfully unnoticed. His eyes were cold, filled with a chilling intent that needed no further explanation. He left the room to answer the door, and I heard the muffled sounds of a new arrival. Frantically, I started working on the zip tie, sawing at it with the knife. I sliced my fingers in the process, but I didn't stop. Just as I felt the plastic snap, my captor returned, bringing his next victim with him. I froze. If I ran, I'd be shot. I had to wait for the right moment, pray that surprise would give me an edge over his gun. The newcomer was a stark contrast to the grim surroundings. He had wavy black hair, a friendly face with a dimpled smile, and wore a crisp white shirt and neatly pressed dress pants. He looked completely out of place in this dilapidated house. He was carrying a handful of booklets. My heart sank when I saw the words "The Watchtower" on the cover. This poor guy was just trying to spread his faith, and he'd stumbled into a nightmare. His smile faltered when he saw me, his eyes widening at the sight of the blood on my face and my torn shirt. "Is this a bad time?" he asked hesitantly. "I can come back later." His captor didn't answer. He just grabbed the newcomer and slammed him onto the table, sending the booklets flying. "Please, I haven't seen anything. I won't." Dash, the newcomer begged, his voice cut short as the kidnapper silenced him. He bound the newcomer's wrists with the same cruel efficiency he'd used on me, then shoved him into the chair across the table. The poor guy was terrified, his whole body trembling. I didn't blame him. My own heart hammered in my chest as I waited for an opportunity to strike. "I can't believe how lucky I am," the kidnapper chuckled, running a hand over his bald head. "2 products just knocked on my door. Here I thought I was only shipping one today. Now behave. You're worth more alive." I saw the gun tucked into the back of his waistband and quickly calculated the distance between us. Could I reach him before he drew his weapon? Or should I wait for him to get closer? I didn't have time to decide. The newcomer, overwhelmed by panic, suddenly lunged to his feet, trying to make a run for it. There was a brief struggle, a flash of movement, and then a gunshot. I watched in horror as the newcomer crumpled to the floor, his crisp white shirt blossoming with crimson. Nausea welled up inside me. If I had acted sooner, this wouldn't have happened. I had a knife, but I hesitated, and now a man lay dying in front of me. Like I said, you're worth more alive. The kidnapper's voice snapped me back to reality. He stepped over the body and loomed over me, pressing the still hot muzzle of the gun against my cheek. Dizziness washed over me, and my hand trembled so violently that I almost dropped the knife. "I'll make you a deal," he said, his breath hot and foul in my face. "Call 2 people over here, and I'll let you go free." I tried to pull away, but he grabbed a fistful of my hair, holding me in place. "I don't," I stammered, wanting to tell him that I had no one to call. Even if I did, what was the point? He would just kill them too. What was he planning? Who would pay for dead bodies? It was all too risky, too insane. Then, a chilling realization dawned on me. One so horrific that I couldn't even bring myself to consider it until the newcomer moved. He was supposed to be dead, but he was slowly, silently shifting on the floor. Our eyes met, and a smile spread across his face. It wasn't a smile of joy or relief, but something cold, something sinister. It sent a shiver down my spine. "Oh, come on. No one. A handsome guy like yourself must have a girlfriend. What about a relative or 2 you don't like?" The kidnapper taunted, oblivious to the scene unfolding behind him. I wasn't listening. My attention was fixed on the newcomer, who was now rising to his feet, his movements fluid and deliberate. The kidnapper, still focused on me, remained blissfully unaware of the danger lurking just behind him. "Turn around," I hissed, my voice urgent. "I'm not falling for that," he scoffed, his face contorted in anger. He started patting my pockets, searching for my phone. I shook my head frantically, pleading with him to just look over his shoulder. I no longer needed the knife for him. I had a feeling I'd need it for what was coming. "Turn the hell around," I snapped again. "There's nothing, Dash," he yelled, finally heeding my warning. He spun around to face the man he'd just shot. My jaw dropped as the creature, the thing I had assumed was dead, rose on all fours and silently scaled the wall, spider-like, until it was perched on the ceiling. A wide, dimpled smile stretched across its face as the kidnapper finally registered what he had brought into his home. To his credit, the man reacted quickly, drawing his gun with surprising speed. But the creature was faster, with a blur of motion. It snapped the man's wrist, silencing his cry of pain with another swift movement. Then it casually tossed him across the room, his body crumpling against the cheap drywall. The creature's eyes met mine, and it winked before gracefully dropping from the ceiling. "Sit tight," it said in a gentle voice that did nothing to calm my nerves. My instinct screamed at me to run. If this monster was focused on the other man, I had a chance to escape. I glanced at the blood-stained floor littered with religious pamphlets. WWJD, "What would Jesus do?" mocked one of the headlines. A grim smile tugged at my lips. I hated this. I hated what I had gotten myself into. I watched as the creature hauled the kidnapper back to his feet. His wrist was mangled, his head bleeding from the impact with the wall. The creature forced him into a chair, spinning it around so they were face to face. I gripped the knife tighter, bracing myself for the horrors that were sure to come. You were saying we were products. Who's your buyer? Is it Mr. Shark or something else? The creature asked, its voice deceptively kind. It pinned the kidnapper's wrist to the chair, then drove a knee into his stomach when he struggled. Fuck you! The kidnapper spat, his face contorted in defiance. He was caught between a rock and a hard place. If he betrayed his buyer, he'd be a marked man. But if he refused, he'd face unimaginable torture. For a moment, I thought they were at a standstill, but monsters have ways of making people talk. A thin, pointed tube extended from the creature's mouth, shooting out with startling speed and piercing the corner of the kidnapper's eye. A choked scream escaped the man's lips before his body went rigid. The tube retracted, leaving only a trickle of blood in its wake. The kidnapper's face was frozen in a mask of terror, his eyes wide with fear and understanding. Whatever that creature had done, it had completely neutralized him. We could have done this the easy way. The creature sighed. Actually, so far, you made my job very easy by letting me inside. Your greed made you take risks. Your gun gave you confidence. Such a shame you won't be able to learn from your mistakes. I expected a cruel, gloating tone, but its voice remained gentle, the same soft voice it had used since entering the house. The normalcy of it, the utter lack of malice, made my skin crawl. It raised its hands to either side of the kidnapper's head, its index fingers morphing into wickedly sharp, curved claws that resembled insect legs. With agonizing slowness, it traced a circle around the crown of the man's head, connecting the lines in the front. If I hadn't already been sick to my stomach, the sight of the man's skull being lifted clean off, exposing his pulsating brain, would have sent me retching. If I had been braver, stronger, I would have attacked while the creature was distracted. Instead, I squeezed my eyes shut as the creature's face split open into 4 segmented sections. I didn't see the full extent of its monstrous form, but the sickening sounds of its gruesome feast were enough to make my blood run cold. I don't know how long I stayed like that, eyes closed, ears ringing with the echoes of the creature's feeding. Minutes? An hour? Maybe it would leave me unharmed. Maybe I should have begged for my life, groveled for that slim chance of escape. But I did something stupid, something reckless, something necessary. I decided the world didn't need another monster like this. I felt a hand on my shoulder and, in a flash, plunged a knife into the creature's neck. Its face snapped back to its human form, an expression of surprise, almost offended, flitting across its features. "Ow!" it said, its voice devoid of pain. At least I had caught it off guard. I leaped to my feet, grabbing its hand before it could recover. Confusion kept it momentarily frozen, giving me the opportunity to do what I needed to do. A burning sensation erupted between our clasped hands, jolting the creature and giving it the impetus to fling me across the room. I landed hard against the counter, exactly as planned. Now, I was within reach of the knife block, the only real weapon in the room. If I had gone for it initially, the creature would have stopped me. I needed it to underestimate me, to give me this opening. My vision blurred, my head swam, and my empty stomach churned. I pushed myself forward, adrenaline momentarily overriding the weakness in my limbs. The creature was on me in a flash. I swung wildly, aiming for its neck. If I could decapitate it, surely that would stop it. The knives were sharp, honed to cut through bone. But I needed more power, more strength than my starved body could muster. My attack failed. I managed to land a few more superficial cuts, but the creature had me by the throat, its grip tightening. My vision faded, my lungs burned, and I saw its face splitting open, ready to feed once more. A sudden thump from upstairs made it pause. Its face reverted to its human form, its grip loosening just enough for me to gasp for air. "He said 3 products, right?" it said, its dimpled smile returning. "Let's go see who the third person is." I struggled weakly as it dragged me up the stairs towards the source of the noise, a bedroom with a violently shaking closet door. My legs buckled as I tried to stand, my body screaming in protest. I needed a weapon, anything to stop this creature. I refused to let it claim another victim. My heart sank when the closet door flew open and a small child, no older than 4, rushed out, clinging to the creature's leg and crying for their father. My mouth went dry as the creature reached down, gently lifting the child and gazing at its tear-stained face. I had to do something. I scanned the bare room for a weapon, anything I could use. Then, something unthinkable happened. The child wrapped its tiny arms around the creature's neck and sobbed. The creature, in turn, carefully adjusted its grip to support the child's weight. Its head turned, its eyes meeting mine. My jaw slackened. There was something in its eyes, a tenderness I wouldn't have thought possible. "It's so cute," the creature whispered, a note of genuine affection in its voice. The tension drained from my body, and I collapsed onto the floor, utterly exhausted. "If you try to hurt this kid, I'll kill you," I warned, though the threat felt hollow even to my own ears. "Go find some soap," the creature said. "We'll get this little one cleaned up, and I'll explain a few things." I stared at it, dumbfounded. I couldn't leave it alone with the child, but it hadn't hurt the child. It seemed to be protecting it. We found some dish soap in the bathroom, and I watched in disbelief as the same creature that had moments before devoured a man's brain now gently washed the dirt and tears from the child's face and arms. With no clean clothes available, it simply focused on cleaning the exposed skin. The tenderness of its touch seemed to soothe the child, who soon fell asleep in its arms. I offered to hold the child, but the creature just scowled at me. Instead, it handed me a phone, instructed me to call the only number in its contacts list. A woman answered, and I relayed the address where the phone's owner had been directed to go. "I take it you've dealt with supernatural creatures before," the creature said after I ended the phone call. I nodded, choosing to keep my experiences to myself for now. "You pulled a bit of magic from my hand," it continued. "Most humans can't do that. If you took better care of yourself, you might have given me some trouble. You should leave before my handler gets here." Again, I remained silent about my past. I wanted answers. I wanted to understand who this creature was and what it was doing here. "I don't fully trust you'll eat the kid the moment I'm out of the room," I said, crossing my arms. It looked me over, then began unbuttoning its collar, revealing a black band tattooed around its neck. I recognized it instantly. A leash. "I'm on a leash," it explained. I can't harm anyone that isn't related to my job. There's been a ring of human traffickers lately, selling humans to supernatural creatures for all sorts of reasons. I'm tracking down the sellers, not the products. You were going to eat me, I pointed out. It was self-defense, it said with a smug grin. You attacked me first. I hated this about monsters. An old friend once told me all supernatural creatures would make excellent lawyers. They twisted words, exploited loopholes, and created enough doubt to make their arguments seem valid. Nothing good ever came from talking with monsters, let alone trying to make deals with them. Just then, someone entered the house. A woman stormed up the stairs, her face a mask of fury as she searched for the troublesome creature she was responsible for. She was strikingly beautiful, but in a meticulously crafted way. I bet it took her 2 hours each morning to perfect her makeup and hair. In her rage, she didn't immediately notice the reason we had called her. August, you better have a damn good reason for, oh my God. What do you have there? The woman rushed over, her hands outstretched to take the child from August's arms. He hesitated for a moment, then carefully relinquished the precious bundle. As his hands were freed, his face fell, and he let out a distressed squeak. "Who are you?" the woman asked, finally noticing me standing there. "Innocent bystander," I replied with a shrug. "Shit. Well, supernatural creatures are dash," she began, but I waved her off. "I'm a retired contract worker," I explained. "I know all about monsters and such. Is the kid going to be okay?" She breathed a sigh of relief. "Yes, we'll get in contact with his family. If he comes from a bad environment, we'll find a suitable home for him. Here's my card if you want any kind of follow-up. Did August attack you? You're bleeding." I touched my nose, suddenly aware of how battered I must look. I took the card, though I mostly wanted to put the whole ordeal behind me. I did no such thing. "I'm on a leash," August interjected, arms crossed. "Fuck off. We all know you're a little shit that causes problems," she growled back at him. "It was self-defense," he insisted with a grin that made me want to punch him. "Don't worry about it," I said to the woman. "I'll leave you guys to your work. Just make sure the kid is taken care of." I turned to leave, but the woman, to her credit, offered me a ride home. A few minutes later, I found myself back in my small apartment, my body aching and my only decent shirt stained with blood. I collapsed onto my bed, vowing never to deal with supernatural creatures again. Door-to-door salesmen joined the ever-growing list of jobs I refused to do. A few days later, I found myself staring at my phone, an email notification blinking on the screen. I had been paid for assisting with the human trafficking case. It was enough to cover my rent for another month. But why would that monster share the reward? Had his handler sent it because she felt bad about me getting dragged into their mess? Or was it August himself? I didn't know much about him, but he seemed like the type who didn't care much for money. Giving it away was probably easier than figuring out how to spend it. There were other emails in my inbox, too. Job offers. I had quit hunting monsters 2 years ago, but the requests still trickled in from time to time. If I went back, I wouldn't have to worry about rent anymore. I put my phone away, shaking my head. No matter what, I refuse to go back to that life. Working in customer service was stressful enough. You ever spent any time in a small town? Gossip's like oxygen. Who's sleeping with who got run out on a rail, why the diner fired its cook. It's all anyone talks about. My town? We got that, sure. But we also got other stuff. Weird stuff. People going missing. Things that ain't quite right. Creatures you wouldn't believe even if they were staring you in the face. Practically every shadow's got something hiding in it you wish it didn't. I live in this nowhere town in eastern Colorado. Population 2,000. Born and raised here. Never left. Never wanted to. Used to think all the spooky stories were just that. Stories. Until a few years back, I started poking around. Curiosity got the better of me. Figured it was time to find out what really makes this town tick. So, here I am, ready to spill the beans. One weird thing at a time. And we're starting with Old Man Hemming's abandoned van. Summer 2020. Me and my buddies, Sarah and Jess, we were bored out of our skulls. So, naturally, we were trespassing. Hold up, isn't this Hemming's land? Sarah says, out of nowhere. Yeah, probably. Why? I'm not exactly thrilled about being here. Dude, you don't remember that story about him? Seriously? Sarah's practically cackling. Like I can keep track of every crazy tale this town cooks up. Just chimes in before I can even answer. Oh, come on. You gotta remember, kids have been whispering about Old Man Hemming since like forever. She's trying to get me to bite. You know, the van out in the field, the one nobody ever comes back from. Maybe? Rings a bell. I'm still not convinced this is worth my time. Let's go find it. Jess is way too excited about this. Trust me, it's not that exciting, Sarah says, laughing. Wait, you've seen it? Now I'm interested. Nah, never actually seen anyone go near it. Just got a glimpse from the road, freaked out and bailed. We all just stand there for a minute, the idea sinking in. I think I remember where it is though. It's been a while, but let's give it a shot. So, we spend the next hour traipsing through this 100-acre wasteland, and finally, there it is. This van, you couldn't tell what it was really. Maybe light blue ones, but now it's just rust and rot, baked by the sun, chewed up by the winters. I don't know much about cars, but it looked old, like 1950s old, half swallowed by the ground, like it was giving up, and it was miles from any road. Made 0 sense for it to be there. But hey, it wouldn't be the first time I've seen a car rotting away in the middle of nowhere. The closer we got to that van, the creepier it felt. The wind was whistling through the trees and bushes around it, scratching against the rusted metal like fingernails on a chalkboard. We were just a few feet away, and we all started giggling nervously. None of us could say why, but the whole thing felt off. Sarah wrestled with the door handle. It groaned and creaked, but finally gave way. The windows were either tinted or just plain black with grime, so we couldn't see inside. But when Sarah pulled the door open, man, our jaws dropped. The inside was pristine, like straight out of the 50s, but brand new. Cherry red leather seats, that new car smell, fuzzy dice hanging from the mirror. And get this, the radio was playing some old song, low and sweet, but none of us recognized it. Goosebumps everywhere. We'd all heard the stories about the van, but nobody ever mentioned the inside being like that. Sarah reached in, found the keys in the ignition, took a deep breath, and sat down. Jess and I both gasped. It felt like she'd just crossed an invisible line. We all froze. Like if we moved, something bad would happen. The wind howled around us, and for a minute, it was the only sound. See, guys? Told you it was nothing, Sarah said, starting to fiddle with the knobs on the radio. Jess and I circled the van, peering in from every angle. It just felt wrong. So wrong. Sorry to disappoint you ladies, but I'm still here. As you can see, I'm still in the van, even though Dash, and then she slammed the door shut. Jess and I waited and waited. Figured she was just messing with us. Didn't want to ruin her fun. But after what felt like forever, I went back to the van, yanked the door open, ready for her to jump out and yell gotcha or something. But she was gone, and the inside, back to its old, rotten self. Radio off, keys gone. Just like that, we spent the next hour searching for her, freaking out. Didn't want to get in trouble for trespassing, so we tried to find her ourselves, but there was no sign of her. Finally, we had to get help. That was the last time I ever saw Sarah. Years went by. Nobody seemed to care. It was like she never existed. I couldn't even find any record of her disappearing online. A couple years later, I found myself back at Hemmings Field. Something drew me to that van. I opened the door, and there it was. The pristine interior, the radio playing that same eerie tune. It all came rushing back. The day Sarah vanished, the feeling of dread, the chilling silence after she disappeared. The closer we got to the car, the more the hairs on the back of my neck stood on end. It was like the air itself had turned thick and heavy, pressing down on us. The wind whispered through the trees and bushes surrounding the car, their branches scraping against the rusted metal like claws. We were just a few feet away, and a nervous giggle escaped my lips. Ally and Linda must have felt it too, that sense of creeping dread, because they started giggling too, though none of us could say why we were so scared. Linda, always the bravest of the three of us, reached for the door handle. It was stiff and resistant, but with a grunt and a shove, she managed to wrench it open. The windows were dark, either tinted or caked with years of grime, obscuring the interior. But when the door swung open, our jaws dropped. Inside, the car was pristine, a perfectly preserved time capsule from the 1950s, with cherry red leather seats that looked soft and inviting, and the unmistakable scent of a brand new car filling the air. Fuzzy dice hung from the rear view mirror, swaying gently in the breeze, and strangest of all, the radio was playing a soft, unfamiliar melody that sounded like it was straight out of a bygone era. Goosebumps erupted all over my body. We'd all heard the rumors about the car, about people disappearing, but no one had ever mentioned the inside. It was like stepping into another world. Linda, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and fascination, leaned in and found the keys dangling in the ignition. With a deep breath, she slid into the driver's seat. Ally and I gasped, our hands flying to our mouths. It felt like she just stepped into a trap. We froze, the three of us, caught in a tableau of fear and uncertainty. The wind whistled around us, and for a moment, it was the only sound that dared to break the silence. "See, guys? Told you it was silly," Linda said, her voice a little shaky as she started to fiddle with the knobs on the dashboard. Ally and I, unable to tear our eyes away from the scene unfolding before us, slowly circled the car, peering in from every angle. Something about it felt wrong, deeply wrong, like a puzzle piece that didn't quite fit. Sorry to disappoint you ladies, but I'm still here. As you can see, I'm still in the car, even though Linda's voice was cut off abruptly as the door slammed shut. Ally and I stared at the car, our hearts pounding in our chests. We waited, an uncomfortable silence stretching between us, the wind whipping our hair around our faces. We figured she was just messing with us, trying to scare us, and we didn't want to ruin her fun. But after what felt like an eternity, 90 seconds that stretched into agonizing minutes, I couldn't take it anymore. I lunged forward and yanked the car door open, expecting Linda to jump out and yell gotcha or something. But to my horror, the driver's seat was empty, and the interior, gone was the pristine time capsule, replaced by the same decay and ruin that marked the exterior. The radio was silent, the keys vanished. Linda was gone. We spent the next hour in a frenzy, searching every inch of the field, calling out Linda's name until our voices were hoarse. We were terrified, but also hesitant to call for help, afraid of getting in trouble for trespassing. But as the sun began to set and the shadows lengthened, casting an eerie pall over the field, we knew we had no choice. That was the last time I ever saw Linda. Years passed, and it was like she'd been erased. No one seemed to care. No one seemed to remember. I scoured the internet, desperate for any mention of her disappearance, but found nothing. It was like she never existed. A couple of years later, drawn by an inexplicable force, I found myself back in Old Man Marley's field. The car was still there, a rusting hulk swallowed by the weeds and the tall grass. With a trembling hand, I reached for the door handle. A strange mix of fear and morbid curiosity compelling me forward. The door creaked open, and to my astonishment, the interior was once again pristine, just as it had been the day Linda disappeared. The cherry red leather seats gleamed, the fuzzy dice swayed gently, and the radio played that same haunting melody. A shiver ran down my spine, and the memory of that day, the day Linda vanished, came flooding back, vivid and chilling. I pulled myself out of the swirling pool of memories and headed back towards town. I was planning on just going home, but the rain started coming down, heavy and insistent, and I ducked into the local diner for shelter. It felt like the weather was mirroring the gloom that had settled over me. I slid onto a stool at the high-top bar, the vinyl squeaking beneath me. Mrs. Patty, the owner, a woman who'd seen more of this town's history than anyone else I knew, glanced up from the kitchen and gave me a knowing look. I won't go into too much detail about Mrs. Patty now, but let's just say she'd witnessed her fair share of strange occurrences in this town. That's a story for another time. "Why so gloomy, honey?" she asked, her voice a warm drawl that belied the concern in her eyes. "It's nothing," I mumbled. "Just got a lot on my mind." She didn't believe me. Not for a second. Mrs. Patty was nobody's fool. I knew I wasn't going to win this game of pretend. Okay, you win. I conceded with a sigh. Have you ever heard anything about that old car in Mr. Marley's field? Her eyes widened as if I'd struck a nerve. Clearly, I jogged a memory. Oh, honey, it's been years since I thought about that car, she said, her voice low and serious. When I was young, we used to dare each other to go sit in it. It started with rumors that it was haunted because of the music that would play on the radio. Then one day, my friend Rebecca, she shut the door and never came out. We were just kids, watching from a distance, and we got confused when she didn't open the door again. I went to check on her, and she was just gone. We searched for her for a while, then gave up and went home. Told our parents, and that was that. A week later, my friends and I went back, and my friend Sal, he did the same thing as Rebecca. Sat down, shut the door, and vanished. I never saw Rebecca or Sal again. They just disappeared into thin air. Just another one of this town's unsolved mysteries. Wait, I said, my mind reeling. Your friends were the ones who started the urban legend? Yes, unfortunately, Mrs. Patty said sadly. They never got justice. It seemed like everyone else just forgot about them. She paused, her gaze fixed on me, and I could see the realization dawn in her eyes. Oh no, don't tell me you. Yes, I interrupted, my voice thick with emotion. You remember my friend Linda? She got in the car and never came out. Oh, that poor sweet girl, she said, her voice filled with sympathy. I'm so sorry, Callie. I fought back tears, the grief threatening to overwhelm me. You know, she continued, something that always stood out to me about that car was the keys and the ignition. My head snapped up. What about the keys? Well, I'm sure you noticed that when you open a car, the inside looks as good as new, like it's been sent back from the 1950s. But as soon as someone gets in and shuts the door, the next time it's opened, the interior is old and decrepit, matching the outside. But do you know what's missing when you open that door back up? She let the question hang in the air, the silence heavy with anticipation. I leaned forward, my heart pounding, desperate for answers. The keys, I exclaimed, the realization hitting me like a bolt of lightning. Exactly, Mrs. Patty confirmed, her voice grave. I don't know if it means anything, but where do those keys go? I don't know. It's probably nothing, but I'm too old now to do anything about it. No! I think you're onto something. I blurted out, adrenaline surging through me. I jumped off my stool, the urgency of the situation overriding my initial hesitation, and ran back out into the pouring rain. As I sprinted through the muddy field, the wind whipping at my face and rain stinging my eyes, I started to question my own sanity. Was I really chasing after a set of car keys, hoping to solve the mystery of my friend's disappearance? It seemed absurd, even to me. But then I saw the car, a dark silhouette against the stormy sky, and a shiver ran down my spine. It was as if the car itself was watching me, daring me to approach. I slowed my pace, my heart pounding in my chest, a strange mix of fear and determination fueling me. The rhythmic drumming of raindrops on the windshield created an eerie soundtrack to my approach. With trembling hands, I grasped the cold metal of the door handle and pulled. The familiar sight and sounds of the pristine interior greeted me, the saxophone melody from the radio seeming louder and more insistent than ever. I carefully placed one knee on the seat, making sure that if the wind slammed the door shut, my leg would prevent it from trapping me inside. Leaning in, I reached for the keys, but they were stuck, held fast by rust and years of neglect. I pulled harder, my fingers aching, and a wave of dizziness washed over me. I paused, my head swimming, and made sure my leg was still securely wedged in the doorway. As I sat there, a strange calm descended over me. The music, once unsettling, now seemed soothing, almost hypnotic. The soft leather of the seat pressed against my leg, inviting me to sink in further. An overwhelming urge to sit back and close the door washed over me, growing stronger with every passing second. I clenched my jaw, my eyes squeezed shut, fighting against the seductive pull of the car. With a final burst of adrenaline, I grabbed the keys and yanked with all my might. They came loose with a jolt, and the music instantly swelled, the saxophone blaring, the melody turning from calming to chaotic. It took every ounce of willpower I had to pull myself away from the car, but I knew I had to escape its grasp. A voice whispered in the back of my mind, tempting me with the possibility of finding Linda, of discovering where all the missing people had gone. But deep down, I knew it was a lie, a siren song leading to oblivion. I stumbled out of the car and ran, my lungs burning, my legs aching, the keys clutched tightly in my hand. I didn't look back, didn't dare to. As I fled, I wondered what to do with the keys. Should I give them to Mrs. Patty? No, it didn't seem fair to burden her with this knowledge, with this responsibility. Besides, maybe the keys were meaningless, just a random piece of the puzzle. I finally reached my house, breathless and exhausted, and stumbled into my room. I didn't know what to do with the keys, so I tossed them into my bedside drawer, hoping to forget, hoping to escape the haunting memories of the car and the friends it had stolen. The next day, curiosity gnawing at me, I returned to Old Man Marley's field. I had to see what, if anything, had changed now that the cursed key was in my possession. The car appeared the same as always, its rusted exterior a stark contrast to the lush greenery surrounding it. But when I opened the door, my breath caught in my throat. The interior was no longer the pristine time capsule I'd come to expect. It was just as old and decrepit as the outside. The seats cracked and faded, the radio silent, and the keys, of course, were gone. Relief washed over me. It seemed the problem had solved itself. All I had to do was keep the keys hidden, or better yet, find a way to get rid of them permanently. With a newfound sense of purpose, I hurried back home, eager to dispose of the keys once and for all. I pulled open my bedside drawer, but my stomach dropped. The keys were gone. Panic seized me. I frantically dumped the entire contents of the drawer onto the floor, but the keys were nowhere to be found. I spent hours searching my room, tearing through every nook and cranny, desperately trying to remember if I'd even put them in the drawer in the first place. Had my memory played tricks on me? Exhausted and defeated, I finally gave up and collapsed into bed. Maybe the keys had simply vanished, taking their sinister power with them. Maybe I was finally free. But the next morning, as I headed out to run some errands, my heart sank. Before I even opened my car door, I heard the faint strains of that haunting melody drifting from the radio. With a sense of dread, I slowly opened the door and peered inside. There, dangling from the ignition, was the rusty old key. The same overwhelming urge to shut the door and surrender to the car's pull washed over me. But this time, I resisted. with trembling hands. I snatched the key from the ignition, my mind reeling with questions. How had the key found its way into my car? How could it possibly fit both ignitions so perfectly? After confirming that my own car key still worked, I jumped out and frantically searched for a place to bury the cursed key. I dug a hole a foot deep and buried it, hoping to finally be rid of it. But a few hours later, when I checked my car, there it was again, back in the ignition. Confusion and frustration mounted as I tried every method imaginable to dispose of the key. I threw it in a pond, locked it in a box, even smashed it with a hammer. But no matter what I did, it always returned, as if tethered to my car by some invisible force. To this day, I still have those damn keys. They seem to have chosen my car as their host, a constant reminder of the town's dark secret and the friends I lost. It's unsettling knowing that my car possesses the power to transport me to some unknown realm at any moment. But if someone has to live with this burden, it might as well be someone who understands the danger. So I never let anyone borrow my car. It's a small price to pay for the safety of others. A constant reminder of the strange and unsettling phenomena that lurk beneath the surface of my cozy little town.